get in trouble on Sunday for that, but I think it is. There we go. Now it's working. There's a short in it. Oh, sorry. My name's Dale Metzger. I'm the pastor here. That's why I'm yelling back and forth to the sound man, who does a great job. We're really happy to have you here. We're happy to have you come and have Sam use this piano. And would you welcome, please, our special guest tonight, Sam Rotman.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and what a lovely building. It's wonderful, wonderful piano. Let me just acknowledge Diane here and her husband, Randy. They're the ones I contacted about perhaps coming here, and they were very gracious and excited about having me. And then they came to the church here, to Joyce and the secretary and the people here at the church. So I thank the church and the session for having me. I heard this is the best piano in town, and it's a good piano. It's very good. So the program is about an hour and a half, so you know we're here till 8:30. So just so you know how long it is. And I play classical music. It's not hymn arrangements or gospel music. It's classical music. And it's all one composer, Beethoven. So everybody should have a program, because I'm going to share a lot of good information about the music, because this is something I do. I really want you to know what the music is and things like that. So does anyone need a program? Everyone have? Okay, very good. So Beethoven's my favorite composer. In fact, recently Beethoven celebrated his 250th anniversary of his birth. And so let's just look right at the program and start in. The first piece on the program is the first piece Beethoven ever wrote for the piano. He was 25 years old. He was a great pianist. He gave concerts of Mozart and Bach, other composers. They knew he was a composer. He studied with Haydn. I'll talk about that in a moment. And so this is his first piece. He had just turned 25. It was December of 1795. And when he played this piece, in one night, music changed forever. Now, that may sound like a radical statement, but it's true. In 15 minutes, what Beethoven did was that he changed the course of music forever. Nobody had written music this intense or dramatic. The piece is in 4 parts. If you look at the program, the first part is lively. The second part is slow. To me, the most profound part is the second part. The third part is a little dance, and the fourth part is very fast. And from the beginning to the end, especially the first and the fourth part, you'll hear this intensity, this drama. To many people, music was background music or entertainment. The emperor would ask Mozart to write something while he's having tea or while he's inviting guests. And so Mozart and other people wrote, I say this very humbly, a lot of music that is not played today. Beethoven said, my music is not background music. It's the power of the human soul. And he's the only composer that every note Beethoven ever wrote is still being played today. He never wrote 1 second of mediocrity. So, for instance, Mozart wrote 600 pieces. You know how many are played today? 80. Now, they are phenomenal, but 520 pieces he wrote that nobody's ever heard of. But he is a giant of a composer, not Beethoven. Everything he wrote. So this was this person that came on the scene and brought this intensity. Notice who it's dedicated to on your program. It's dedicated to Franz Joseph Haydn. Haydn was a very important composer. He taught Beethoven for a while, and he mentored Mozart. In fact, he was 14 years older than Mozart, 20 years older than Beethoven. He was known as Papa Haydn because of his elder statesmanship. And he taught Beethoven for a while, and he literally, Beethoven saying, thank you for your guidance, Papa Haydn, Franz Joseph, as he would refer to him, and thank you. I dedicate this piece to you. So you see how he's thanking him, acknowledging him, that I dedicate this piece to you, Franz Joseph Haydn. The first piece for the piano by Beethoven. Even the baby liked it. You cheer on, little guy. I need that. Good, good. So, 18 months after Beethoven played this piece, something happened to Beethoven that would change his life forever, and that is he began to go deaf. He began to lose his hearing. He began to have ringing in his right ear and then ringing in his left ear. And he went to see some doctors who basically gave him horns to funnel the sound. So the next 5.25 years, Beethoven began this slow descent into becoming totally deaf. The ringing began to go away, and he thought, oh, good, I'm getting healed. But the ringing was going away because his hearing was going away. So 80% of the music that Beethoven wrote, he couldn't hear a note of it. Some of the greatest music your ears will ever hear was written by a man who couldn't hear it. So I've been asked for 50 years, how can a man write music if he can't hear it? And the answer is that you don't need to hear music with your ears to hear music in your head. So I'm going to show you how that works. I'm going to sing for you the Star-Spangled Banner. Oh, who say... Do you hear the Star-Spangled Banner? You sure do. You hear it in your head. So you see, you don't need to hear music to hear music. You can hear it. Right now, I can hear the hymn Amazing Grace. I hear it. But this is the big difference between you and me and Beethoven. We are not Beethoven. You know the Star-Spangled Banner because you've heard the Star-Spangled Banner. Beethoven heard music that nobody ever heard. And I have a book called Beethoven in His Own Words, where he talks about excerpts on different subjects from his letters and a diary that he kept. And a man wrote to him where he got his musical ideas. And Beethoven wrote, and I quote, "The music in my mind has been given to me by the Almighty, and I am just putting it down on paper for him." Now you have to understand, that's a very humble statement. God gives me the music, I take some ink, I have a white sheet of paper, I put some dots on it, and 250 years later, Sam Rotman hears the music and he weeps uncontrollably. So I share all of this with you because Beethoven wrote the next piece on your program. Look at your program, Sonata Number 8. He wrote this piece while he was going deaf. So this was his intense turmoil. And so this piece is called the Pathetique. It's a very famous piece. The word pathetique comes from the Greek word pathos, which actually means suffering. Suffering. It doesn't mean emotions. It doesn't mean passion. It means suffering. And that's where we get the phrase of the passion of Christ, which is the suffering of Christ. This is not the emotions of Christ. This is the suffering of Christ. And it's in the Greek, de pathos de Christus, the suffering of the Christ. And Beethoven was going through suffering. The German word is Angst. I speak German. In the first 30 seconds, you'll hear these chords, and it's absolutely like daggers in the heart. The piece gets there very fast, very agitated, and when my right hand goes over my left hand, if you can see that, I know we're all on the same level, but when my right hand goes over my left hand, this is Beethoven talking to himself. Imagine for 5 years, you're a musician, you're going deaf. I think you have a lot of conversations with yourself. And so this is Beethoven talking to himself. The piece balances between this angst and this agitation and the conversation. The second movement is one of the most beautiful pieces Beethoven ever wrote. It is absolute peace. I would think that the slow part would be full of angst also. And he wrote a lot of pieces that were slow with a lot of tragedy. This is absolute resignation, acceptance. Many friends of mine who are pianists believe this is the most beautiful piece Beethoven ever wrote. I try to play the piece almost not breathing because it's so pure emotionally. The third movement, again, is agitated. It gets building up and building up and building up until finally at the end of the piece, Beethoven is hitting the piano with his fist. Now, not literally his fist, but you'll hear in my left hand these chords where it's actually pounding and pounding. And Beethoven is hitting the piano with his fist because he can't hear anything. He wants to hear something from the instrument, and he hits it, and he can't hear it. So, this is a very powerful piece. Notice who it's dedicated to. Look at your program. It's dedicated to Prince Karl von Lichnowsky. This man was Polish, and he was a nobleman. He was a prince, aristocracy, and he had a palace in Vienna, and he loved classical music. And he had a concert every Friday at his palace. And if you were anybody in Vienna, you came to Prince Lichnowsky's Friday concert. And if you were anybody as a musician or a composer, you were on that program. Well, he saw that Beethoven was going to be Beethoven. And you know who was on every Friday's program? Beethoven. And so Beethoven thanks him again. This is a piece he writes, and he dedicates it to him. Thank you. You are the one that gave me the place that I brought music to the Viennese people, to Vienna, and to all of Greater Europe. I always like to mention that when Beethoven died in 1827, he was purported to be the most famous man in all of Europe. Now that's quite a statement. Beethoven, without a doubt, was the most celebrated composer, legend, while he was still alive, to get this sort of adulation. You know, a lot of composers are great, and yet they die in obscurity, but not Beethoven. The most famous man in all of Europe. When he died, 20,000 people traveled to Vienna for his funeral. Now, this is with horseback and buggy. They had to wait on the funeral because people were coming from Paris, from Prague, and purportedly there was rumored that people actually came from London to hear and to be at the funeral of the great Beethoven. So this is the Pathetique Sonata by Beethoven. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I'm going to play you the next piece, and then after that, I'm going to share a little bit about myself, and then the last piece is only about 5 minutes long. So Beethoven ended up writing 32 pieces like this, 32 sonatas. It's 855 pages of piano music. Look what it did to me. I put in all that music, and all the hair said, we're out of here. So the next piece was written decades later. This is Sonata Number 26. See that? Number 26. So he wrote 32, so this is much closer to the end. And the secret of the piece is who it's dedicated to. It's dedicated on your program to a man named the Archduke Rudolf Rainer. This man was the youngest son of Leopold II, who was the Emperor of Austria. So for decades, I have talked about this piece, and I always refer to it like this. Everybody knows Queen Elizabeth II, right? She has a son named Prince Charles. He is the son of Queen Elizabeth. Now I have to change the story because now he's the king. But Prince Charles is the son of Queen Elizabeth. This man, Rudolf Rainer, is the son of the Archduke, of the Emperor, I'm sorry. He loved music. He was much younger than Beethoven. And he saw that Beethoven was Beethoven. And this is what he said to Beethoven. Beethoven, you write music and I'll pay all your bills. Very simple. Don't teach. Don't go to a university. Beethoven was German, from Bonn, Germany. He came to Vienna because that was the epicenter of classical music with Mozart, Haydn, Schubert. But he was invited to be the music director of a large city in Germany. And he told him, don't go. You write music, write music. And I can say without any hesitation that we would not have what we have today from Beethoven if we did not have this one man, the Archduke Rudolf. 14 of the greatest pieces Beethoven ever wrote are dedicated to him. Do you know how many people had a piece dedicated to them? One. Haydn had one. Juliette Guicciardi, one. Prince Lichnowsky, one. The Archduke, 14. So in May of 1809, a man named Napoleon, you've heard of him? Napoleon is the Emperor of France, and he invades Austria. And Leopold II decides to take his family and his government out of Vienna to an unknown place. Where? Who knows? London, Slovakia, who knows? And Beethoven pleads with him not to go and leave him in Vienna. So he pleads with him. He pleads with him. So this piece is called, if you look at your program, this piece is called, look at your program, the Farewell Sonata. You see it's called Lebewohl, farewell. Now, in German, there's two ways to say goodbye in German. 99% of the time, it's the word Auf Wiedersehen. And Auf Wiedersehen literally means after again, I'll see you. Auf Wiedersehen. Again, I'll see you. Lebewohl is only used when you never expect to see the person again. A final goodbye. And in German culture, you say your Lebewohl if someone is on their deathbed. Come and say your final goodbye. Beethoven was convinced this was a final goodbye. He would never see the Archduke again. Now you would say, well, of course he was interested in him. He was paying all of his bills, not for 10 years. Beethoven became so famous, so well off, that he said to the Archduke, I don't need your money, I need your friendship to continue. And this man helped Beethoven through a lot of turmoil and difficulties. So, no problem. We have a few tired kids, maybe. So on the first three notes of the piece, On the first three notes of the piece, Beethoven writes the word Lebewohl. He never did this in any other piece. He actually writes the word Lebewohl. And throughout the piece, you'll hear these three notes, sometimes in my right hand, my left hand. They overlap sometimes. But these three notes are fare thee well, fare thee well, fare thee well, Lebewohl, Lebewohl. The piece starts slow. When it's fast, my right hand is Beethoven, my left hand is the Archduke, and they're yelling at each other. I mean, Beethoven is yelling at him. He is telling him, pleading with him not to leave, not to leave, not to leave. At the very end of the piece, you can hear the Archduke in his carriage. You can literally hear the horses taking away the carriage on the cobblestone street. And my right hand goes to the top of the piano, my left hand goes to the bottom of the piano, and Beethoven writes a physical separation of the two of them. It's a musical separation, an emotional separation, and a physical separation. The second movement, if you look at your program, is called The Absence, and it was written while he was gone. The Absence. Twice in the piece, you'll hear my right hand all by itself, and this is Beethoven all by himself. In January 30th, 1810, 9 months later, the Archduke came back to Vienna. And you will hear it. Beethoven erupts. He runs to greet him. He no doubt embraces him. They start talking together. I mean, Beethoven talks, he writes things, Beethoven talks. I mean, it's absolute joy, joy, joy. It is purported that when Beethoven saw the Archduke and came home, that he actually wrote this third part in one sitting. In one sitting. Now, let me share something. Beethoven never wrote anything in one sitting. He worked things, he rewrote things. His works look like 15 times erased. He reworked it. He gave labor to every piece. That's why there's such incredible creativity. But he had such joy that in one afternoon he completely perfected this piece. He never got off the piano until he wrote this piece. So this is the Lebewohl, fare thee well, the farewell, the absence, the return, dedicated to the Archduke by Beethoven. Long or so. There you go. Is that on? Good. Thank you. I'd like to share a little bit about myself. And my story begins with my parents. My father was born in Eastern Europe in a country called Romania in 1905. My mother was born in Eastern Europe. At that time, the country was called Czechoslovakia, and she was born there in 1915. So my parents were 10 years difference in age. And they were both very religious Orthodox Jews. So the Orthodox Jews are the strictest Jews to the Jewish faith. They really want to follow all the laws that God gave in the books called the Torah. The Torah are the first 5 books of the Bible, the books of Moses. And God gave all these laws to the Jewish people, and they seek to follow all of those laws. And my parents left Europe in 1940 because of one person, and his name was Adolf Hitler. If my parents stayed in Europe, they both would have been murdered. Absolutely 1,000%. Nobody that stayed in their town survived. 11 months after my father left Romania, the Nazis came to his area of Romania in eastern Romania. They gathered 10,000 Jews, and over the next 2 weeks, they systematically murdered all 10,000. 2 of them were my grandparents. So like a lot of Jews, my parents had to get out of Europe. And so like a lot of Jews, many of them ended up in South America. There were a few countries that had an immigration of welcoming Jews because they had heard of the persecution. My parents ended up in a small country right on the equator called Ecuador. And the capital is called Quito, Ecuador. They lived there from 1940 to 1950. My brother was born there. My sister was born there. My mother was pregnant with me in the spring of 1950. And my father then filled out paperwork to bring his family to the United States. He got permission. They came through New York City. And I was born 5 months later in October of 1950. And I was raised, as you can imagine, in a very, very religious Jewish home. My grandparents died for being Jewish. My parents suffered for being Jewish. And I was instilled with all of my Jewish heritage. My parents sent me to public school during the day. And then I went to school in the synagogue, and it was called Hebrew school. So there are Catholic schools and Protestant schools, and there are not many Jewish schools, but there are some, and it's called Hebrew school. Because you learn Hebrew. The Old Testament's written in Hebrew. You go to Israel, you speak Hebrew. So I learned Hebrew going to Hebrew school. I learned all about being Jewish. I learned literally hundreds of prayers. I went to Hebrew school 5 days a week for 8 years. So I can't emphasize how important this was. 5 days a week for 8 years. I started when I was 8 until I was 16. So all those years of growing up, this was a gigantic part of my life. All my friends were Jewish. All my relatives were Jewish. I remember I'd wake up in the morning, I'd pray for a half an hour in Hebrew, and then I went to school. And as I was growing older, around 11, 12 years old, I began to develop something. Something occurred. It sounds funny now, but it was not funny at the time. But I began to develop a very foul mouth. I could curse very easily. I could lie to my teachers. I could lie to my parents. I was very religious in the synagogue, and these prayers meant a lot to me, and I realized it was easy to act religious. And then an hour later, I'm swearing and cursing and lying, and that was easy. It was easy for me to be religious when I had to, and it was easy for me to be a sinner when I wanted to. Then when I was 17, I was accepted in a music school in New York City, the Juilliard School of Music. I was there for 5 years and got a bachelor's and a master's in piano. And there I met 3 students who called themselves born-again Christians. Well, I never heard that. I had no idea what that was. But every time I saw one of these students in the cafeteria having lunch, having a sandwich, another one was taking break from practicing, they were always reading the Bible. The Bible. I mean, this is not a school of religion, it's a school of music. And these were highly respected students in the school. And when they got together, all they did was talk about Jesus. Jesus did this, and Jesus said this, and why did Jesus say this, and what did Jesus mean when he said this? They never mentioned church, nothing about a church, nothing about the C word, Christianity. It was always this person, Jesus, and Jesus, and Jesus, and Jesus, and Jesus. Well, they heard I was a religious Jew, and they began to talk to me, and they asked me 2 questions. They asked me if I ever read the New Testament, and I said, nope. Not a word. I said the New Testament is not for Jewish people. I never saw one. I never touched one. I never handled one. You would never find a New Testament in our home. I had zero knowledge of it. Zero. Nothing. They asked me if Jesus could be the Messiah. The Jews are waiting for the Messiah. In Hebrew, it's called Mashiach. And I said, Jesus is not the salvation for Jewish people. But I was very moral. You know, my parents almost died for me. They sacrificed a lot for me. So I didn't want to shame them. I didn't want to hurt them. So I never drank alcohol. To this day, I still don't know what a beer tastes like. Never been drunk. If you don't get drunk, you don't do something stupid to shame your parents. I never took drugs. Some of you relate to this. I lived in New York City from 1968 to 1973. That was the height of what was the Vietnam War and also the hippie movement. There were these people, millions of them, who were called hippies. And they said, all the drugs you want and all the sex you want, and maybe you'll find a little happiness. Well, all I can tell you, I don't know how that worked out, but I can say in New York City, it's not what drugs you wanted, it's how much drugs you wanted. There were drugs everywhere. Everywhere. Never took it. Never. Never had premarital sex. So even though I was so moral on the outside, look, no sex, no drugs, no drinking. My friend, I'm going to tell you, I was very, very, very immoral. Immoral. You know where? Right here. Listen, I knew that I was not on the inside the way I could appear on the outside. I could do many Jewish things, many religious things, but it never affected me on the inside. I was very moral, very religious, but not changed. The same foul mouth, dirty-minded, self-centered, egotistical person at 20, 18, 16, 14 years of age. Nothing changed about me. I was the same person. So I made a big decision. I said, well, if I want to know about this person, Jesus Christ, I'm going to read this book, the New Testament. That was a big step for a Jew, because we're told never, never read this book. When I was a student at Juilliard, I used to practice for 10 hours a day. Now, let me tell you, that's not a lie. That's not a lie or an exaggeration. I did not sit at the piano for 9 hours and 45 minutes. I sat every day at the piano for practicing 10 full hours. I never left Juilliard until I completely practiced 10 hours a day. I started to read the New Testament, and my whole life came to a stop. I was shocked when I read this book. For the first time in my life since I started piano as a 9-year-old boy, I stopped practicing. They'd give me a little pocket New Testament, and they said, if you read this book, start in this book called The Gospel of John. Never heard of it. But sure enough, I got it out. I opened it up. There it is, sure enough. So here is a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the light of the world. Wow, are you kidding me? Here's a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the bread of life. Here's a man, Jesus, who said of himself, nobody comes to God, my Father, except through me. He that has the Son of God, Jesus, has life. He that does not have the Son of God, Jesus, does not have life. I am the vine and you are the branches, and without me you can do nothing. No, without God I can do nothing. No, without me you can do nothing. Sam, you love God? You want to obey God? You want to follow God? You want to serve God? You love me. You follow me. You obey me. You serve me. You believe in God, believe also in me. That's the words of Jesus on the same plane. Well, we're in a beautiful church. Let me tell you what I said to myself. Please don't laugh, because this was pretty traumatic to me. I said, this man is an idiot. This man's a lunatic. Nobody ever said words like this. You know who Moses is to the Jews? Moses? Moses never said he was the light of the world. Abraham, the father of the Jews, he never said he was the light of the world. I was shocked at what Jesus kept saying about who he was. Well, I had this New Testament. I was going to throw it away in the garbage, literally. I'm going to go practice. This is ridiculous. And then I said to myself, if this person Jesus is who he says he is, let me repeat that again. If this person Jesus is who he says he is, you know, you can listen to the news media, you can listen to many people, and they'll always tell you, my opinion of Jesus is this. Instead of listening what other people think who Jesus is, why don't you let Jesus tell you who Jesus is? Who are you, Jesus? You want to know who I am, Sam? I am the light of this world. I said, if I throw this book away, I may be making the biggest mistake of my life. I better listen to him. And then Jesus said he came for sinners. I was not a sinner. I was very moral. I was very religious. I spent my whole life looking good for God. I was on God's side. But Jesus said he came to change us on the inside. A new heart, a new birth, a new life. A spiritual heart, spiritual birth, spiritual life. I've played concerts in 61 different countries. 61 different countries. You name a country, I've been there. All through Asia. Every country in Europe. South America. I've been to Cuba twice. I went to Cuba when you couldn't go to Cuba. 28 concerts over 2 tours in Cuba. And let me tell you what I've learned. I don't care if your skin color is purple or orange or blue or black or white or green. There is not a smidgen of difference with a person's color. I don't care if you're a Christian, a Muslim, a Hindu, or a Buddhist. There is no difference. You hear what I said? There's no difference. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Labor Party, Communist Party, Socialist Party. I don't care what language you speak. Out of 10,000 languages and dialects. I don't care what culture you're from, because I'm telling you this truth. Every person in this world, 7.5 billion people, and every person in this room, we are experts at hiding things. Hiding things. You know what's the first thing man did when he disobeyed God? He hid from God. That was the first thing. The first thing. He hid. And we have figured out 1 billion ways of how to hide things from people and God. You can hide things from your friends. You can hide things from your husband, your wife. You can hide things from your parents. You can hide things from a church, from your boss at work. But let me tell you something. Nobody hides anything from this Jesus. He himself said, every word we say, we're going to give an answer for it. And we're going to be judged by the motive of our hearts. And even though I was so moral and religious, listen to me carefully, I thought I was clever enough with my mind and crafty enough with my tongue that I could hide things from people and God. And on May 21st, 1971, 51 years ago, for the first time, I prayed and acknowledged Jesus Christ. And I'm going to tell you what I said. My name is Sam Rotman, and Jesus, I want you to take over my life. Very simple, very simple. I want you to tell me what to do, and I will not tell you what to do. I told Jesus the curse words I said. I told Jesus the lies I had. I told Jesus the dirty thoughts I had, the lies I said. I decided I'm not hiding anything from Jesus. You know something? You don't need to hide anything from Jesus because you're not hiding anything. And I decided I'm not going to make any excuses. Do you realize you can come to Jesus Christ and you don't need to give him an excuse for anything you've ever done in your life? In fact, if you give him an excuse, you're messing it up. You're making it complicated. It's not complicated. We make it complicated. I finished praying. I opened up my eyes. And in a billionth of a second, I knew I was completely changed on the inside. I had a dirty, filthy mouth, and instantly he cleaned it and changed it. I'm going to tell you, I was shocked I stopped cursing. I couldn't form a curse word with my lips if I wanted to. I had a dirty, filthy mind, and he cleaned it and changed it. And the next morning, I woke up, and the first thing I did is I thanked Jesus Christ and thanked Jesus Christ and thanked Jesus Christ. And I couldn't wait to get to Juilliard. And I told every Jewish friend of mine that I've been changed, and I've met the Messiah, and his name is Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. I've played over 3,200 concerts, 3,200 concerts. That's a lot of sweat. And I can tell you that all of my concerts are nothing. You know how much nothing is? Nothing compared to having Jesus Christ. The greatest thing I ever did in my life, the most important thing I ever did in my life, was to give my life to Jesus Christ. Music's not the most important thing in my life. Jesus is, because listen, my friend, only Jesus Christ is able to transform your life, your heart. Your wife cannot change you. Your husband cannot change you. Your parents cannot change you. Your children cannot change you. Let me tell you something. You cannot change you. The hardest person to live with is you. But this is the miracle. The miracle in this world is that this person, Jesus Christ, actually transforms the heart, our hearts, our lives. That's mind-boggling. And he's done it to hundreds and hundreds of millions of people over 2,000 years, and I'm one of them, little me. You know I was Jewish? I was born Jewish. That's the only reason I was Jewish. If I was born in Egypt, I'd be a Muslim. If I was born in India, I'd be a Hindu. I've done concerts. If I was born in Thailand, I'd be a Buddhist. It's not a religion, it's a person. The central person of human history. Every time you write 2022, you're acknowledging Jesus Christ is the central person of human history. Can I tell you something interesting? I'll be done here in 2 minutes. You know what's the first thing you see when you walk into a synagogue? If you ever go into a synagogue, you'll always see the same thing, the 10 Commandments. Every synagogue will have the law that God gave to the Jewish people. You know what's the first thing you see when you walk into a church? You know what it's called? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. And there's a lot of forgiveness up there because I need a lot of forgiveness right here. Every time you see that, here it is on your stained glass, on the top of the church. Every time you see someone wearing it, God's telling you, I've made a way to forgive you. I have one to forgive you. Let me forgive you. Come and let me forgive you and be forgiven. Salvation is not what you will ever do for Jesus Christ. Salvation is everything he's done for you. That's it. And I play the piano for Jesus. He gave me the ears to hear the music, the fingers to play the music, the mind to learn the music, the heart to love the music. Jesus has never missed one of my concerts. 2 people have never missed my concerts, Jesus and me. And every time I give a concert in a church, a hall in Europe, with an orchestra, college, university. He's in the front row. And he says, Sam, I'm looking forward to hearing you play for me tonight. My friend, I have known Jesus for 51 years, and I tell you with all my heart, every fiber of my being, it is worth living for Jesus Christ. Listen, young person, listen. It is worth living for Jesus Christ. He's not a joke. He's not hocus pocus. He's not a curse word. He's not even a nice Christmas story in December. He is the life and the light of the world. Don't let anything become an excuse to keep you from the amazing life there is with Jesus. You are losing life. And you can say like I did, tell him your name. My name is, tell him your name. And Jesus, I want you to take over my life, and he will. I want you to forgive me, and he will. And I want you to be with me and guide me and help me, and he will, and he will, and he will. Music gives me a lot of happiness, but not one note of music will ever change me. I'll play 40,000 notes tonight. 40,000 notes. Not one note will change me. Jesus changed me, transformed me, gave me a new life. The last piece will be done here in 5 minutes. Look at your program. This is a piece you've all heard. It's very famous. It's called the Turkish March. You've all heard this piece. It's very famous. Beethoven heard this when he still had all of his hearing. It's played by some street musicians in Vienna, and he liked it, this march, and he wrote it down in his book. 20 years later, he wrote this piece. So here is this march that you'll hear. You'll all heard it. Then there's these 6 little variations, and each variation is a development or a character on the march. And at the end, you have the march again. So it's the march, the 6 variations, the march. Notice who it's dedicated to. Look at your program. It's dedicated to a man named Franz Oliva. You know who Franz Oliva was? He was Beethoven's accountant. He was his tax man. He took care of all of Beethoven's finances for over 20 years. Can you imagine having that intimate relationship with the legend of Beethoven? He took care of all of his finances. And he said, Franz, you have been a good friend. You have kept all my finances insecure for 20 years. I'm going to dedicate this happy piece to you. So I realized a number of months ago that Beethoven dedicated pieces to counts and countesses. You know, the famous Moonlight Sonata is dedicated to Count Juliette Guicciardi, a very famous noblewoman, an aristocracy. And he dedicated to this countess. So he dedicated pieces to counts, countesses, and even his accountant. I thought that was pretty clever. His countesses, and an accountant. So this is the last piece, the famous Turkish March by Beethoven. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Please be seated just for a minute. I'll call up the pastor in a moment. Just wait 1 second. Anybody have a question like to ask me about my life, my music, my social security number, my... Anybody have a question? Anything you'd like to know? Anything? Yes, ma'am. Do I write music? Well, there's a story to that. I was getting my master's at Juilliard. I'd gotten my bachelor's in 4 years. I was getting my master's. And I had 3 credits to do anything. So I decided to take composing. And my teacher always talked to me about getting to the mind of the composer. And I said, well, I'm going to get into the mind of a composer. I'm going to write something. I had a world-famous teacher. He was the main composition teacher at Juilliard. And he knew me because he'd heard me play a lot of concerts for 4 years. I was a total disaster. I couldn't burp out a note. It was absolute agony. And after 4 weeks of lessons, 4 or 5 weeks, he saw me in the hallway. He always wore a bow tie. And he came up to me just like this. He had his arm like this, and his finger was right here in my nose. And he said, Mr. Rotman, you will be great at playing the music of dead men. But as a living man, you will never write any music. Drop my course or I'll give you an F. Now this is Juilliard. He would have given me an F. They don't give you a C for effort. He would have given me a big F. And he would have ruined my grade point average. So he helped my grade point average, and I got a couple $100 back because I dropped the course early. So I only play the music of dead men. You see, Beethoven's dead. I have 2 friends of mine who are composers, and they send me their music, and they say, Sam, when are you going to play my music? I say, I have to wait till you're a dead man. But I don't write anything. I'm sorry. No, I don't write anything. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. How much is showmanship a part of winning an award? Now, what do you mean by showmanship? What? You are obviously a showman. Well, I mean, let me say, look, you have to play the piano, so that's to begin with. Whether you sit still and your dead face pan, or you move and make a million groans, it doesn't matter. You have to play the piano. Now, I'm very moved by the music. People say I stick out my tongue, I contort my face. I don't know anything I'm doing. I am trying to feel the emotion of the music. I'm trying to feel Beethoven's sorrow while his friend is gone. I'm trying to feel the exuberance. And so I feel this, and so it comes out in some form of intensity and involvement in the music. But I can tell you, I know pianists that play, it looks like, they're as dead as a doornail. And what comes out in the piano is the most exquisite sound I've ever heard, There's one pianist named Sviatoslav Richter, a great Russian pianist, was I thought the greatest pianist of the 20th century. I heard him play 10 times, and he hardly ever moved at all. And I remember the first time I heard him, I walked around New York City for 2.5 hours. I never heard that the piano could sound like this. It was mind-boggling what he did. So what I'm saying is that you can't just be, if your playing is dead, maybe you're a little bit not involved or something. So, you have to show some involvement and some commitment and some intensity, etc. But, it's not like you're putting on a show or something. That's why I say about showmanship. I'm playing the music, and the music has this effect on me, and I'm just sharing it. But it's the music. It's the music. It's the music. So does that help a little bit? Yeah. I know you have a student here, and yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah. Someone else? Any question or anything? Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. I've learned 1,100 pieces. Beethoven only wrote maybe 140 or so for the piano. Yeah, oh no, I play Bach. The three favorite areas I play a lot of is Beethoven. I play a lot of Russian music because my background is Slavic, Russian. I have a whole recording of Russian music, Rachmaninoff, and I play a lot of French music. I love Debussy, Ravel. So I play a lot of French music, a lot of Russian music, a lot of Beethoven. But I'm playing, when I'm not doing this, I'm now playing a lot of Mozart. I'm playing Mozart. I'm playing some Rachmaninoff and things. So I play Bach. I play Prokofiev. Well, that's Russian. Tchaikovsky. That's Russian. I play a lot of Chopin. I mean, if you're not you have to love Chopin. Chopin is the only pianist that wrote for the piano, or the composer. So I love Chopin. Oh yeah, so I play everybody. But those are the areas I really, and everybody is sort of gravitated to certain, composers and things like that. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Does that help to explain? Oh yeah. Yes, ma'am. How many what? I started when I was 9, and I'm 71 now. So 62 years. I know, that's older than you. Do you play the piano? You do? You take lessons? Well, let me tell you, anybody here that has kids who play the piano or any instrument, let me tell you the two things. Practice every day. Do not miss a day. If you miss a day, you have lost what you did the day before. Do not miss a day, even if you've only practiced for 10 minutes. And listen to your teacher. When your teacher tells you this is wrong, remember everything the teacher tells you to improve. Listen to your teacher. She paid me to say that, but no. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. I get asked that all the time. That's usually the first or second question. How did my family? I went and shared with my parents. I knew it'd be very difficult. My father's father died because he was Jewish, and now the son believes in this Jesus. So my father asked me to leave the house. He said 3 things. You're no longer my son. I never want to hear from you. And as far as I'm concerned, you're dead. I did not hear from my parents for several years. I got married to my wife. She's here tonight. We've been married 49 years. The point is that they did not come to the wedding. We have 3 children. I wanted to visit them. Now, they lived in Texas. We lived in the Northeast. But still, I wanted to go there in the summer, enjoy your grandchildren. I was not going to aggravate them, but it was too difficult for my father. My children saw them maybe 4 or 5 times in 25 years. In 1995, my father became ill. I wanted to fly down and be with him. And through my mother, he told me, don't come. He doesn't want you to come. He died 4 days later, and at his request, I did not come to the funeral. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, specifically Mesa. My mother lived in Scottsdale, a very Jewish community. 2 things about my mother. My mother loved classical music. I'm in music because of my mother. Everybody should listen to your mother. Even if you're 80 years old and you're here, listen to your mother. And my mother's family escaped the Holocaust. My father lost his family. My mother's family all got out by the skin of their chinny chin chin. My mother wanted to reach out to me. It was too difficult for my father. So with the passing of my father, I had a great relationship with my mother. She loved my wife, loved our 3 kids. I did concerts for her. I started reading to her from the New Testament. I always asked her, what did the rabbi talk about? She always went to synagogue every Sabbath. More and more I shared with her. And finally, 12 years later, from 1995 to 2007, on February the 12th, my 91-year-old mother came to faith in Jesus Christ. It was absolutely tremendous. It was absolutely tremendous. Praise the Lord. And she's gone to be with the Lord. And I spoke at her funeral. I said, Mother, you're now in the bosom of Father Abraham, which is in Matthew's gospel written to Jews, because to a Jew, heaven is being in the bosom of Father Abraham. It's worth living for Jesus Christ. I prayed 36 years for my mother. Anyone else? Yes, then we're done. You'd love to hear me play for Elise? You know, you can take me home and I can play for Elise. It's on my recording. Really? It's yeah. Take it there for $15. I mean, what is that? That's what. So I have some recordings. One is all Beethoven, my favorite, has for Elise. Also has the whole Moonlight Sonata, the Pathetique, 5 major works by Beethoven. Almost nominated for a Grammy when it came out in 2004. Then I have a recording of Russian music, Mussorgsky and Rachmaninoff. Then there's a DVD of my whole testimony. So my whole story that I shared tonight is visually. You see Hitler, concentration camp, see my Jewish upbringing. I play on it as well, but it's mostly talking, and it's a DVD. They're each $15. There's no tax. The autograph is free. About 25 years ago, I gave a concert in Arizona. I said, tonight the autograph is $15 and the CD is free. And a man came up to me afterward and said, I'd like a CD with no autograph. I want to introduce my wife. I know my wife is, come on up here. Come on here. This is my wife. We've been married 49 years, and she's heard a lot of music. And she doesn't always travel with me, but we have dear friends here, Mike and Leslie Riddle. They're friends that live in Boise, and I have concerts there, and then this worked out here through Diane. And so she came up, and so she came to Christ in college. Then she worked with InterVarsity Fellowship into New Jersey. And when I came to know the Lord, the people guided me to a church, a Baptist church in New Jersey. So we met in this church, got married in this church. We have 3 children, 5 grandchildren. And I'm so happy when she can come with me on tours. And she goes with me a lot on foreign tours, but not. It's pretty rare when she's with me on tour in the United States. I mean, because what is she going to do all day while I'm playing and doing practicing and driving? But here we have our dear friends, very dear friends, the Riddles in the back here. And so she came up, and so I'm happy to have her. So, Pastor, come on up. I'm gonna play for an offering, and then I'll be in the back. And again, thank you to the church, and hope you enjoyed the concert. Thank you.
I apologize for jumping up there a moment ago, but there was a giant bee on the floor, and it was headed right for Sam. And so I stepped on it. It's dead, believe me. It really is. I think we should pray, so let's pray. Father God, thank you for Sam. Thank you for playing your music through him. We thank you for his talent, his sense of humor, his love of you, and we know you love him as you love all of us. Thank you for this beautiful evening this evening. Thank you for this time of music and testimony. It's been a great Saturday night. We go in your name, blessed by the gift of your Son, our Savior, in whose name we pray. And all God's people said, amen. We are now going to ask John over here. He's one of our ushers. He's the most honest guy we got. And also for Mr. Riddle, if he will help out over here. And they're going to pass the plate. And please, if you're going to make checks, that's fine, but make them out to Sam Rotman. Do not make them to this church because we've got plenty of money. So make them out to Sam Rotman. Please. Gentlemen.